Hey everyone, welcome to SECT. I am Cierra Clark and I am joined by special guest today, Alyssa Lang from ESPN and SEC Network. But first, make sure you guys visit FANDUEL.com/SECU to join today and get started with $250 in bonus bets when you win your first $5 bet. Alyssa, thank you so much for joining me. She has a crazy schedule right now as we're in the middle of crossover season with basketball, college football, and all the things. But we'll get started with football today. She covers the SEC. She's also an SEC grad. She went to the University of South Carolina. And Alyssa, this SEC college football season, to quote Jesse Palmer, who is also a former Gator, might be the most dramatic season yet, especially right now. We've got about half of the SEC, it seems like, is missing a coach, and then half of them are in the college football playoff. So what are your thoughts on this crazy season?
Yeah, you're so right to say the most dramatic season yet, because I'm almost mad that I hadn't thought about using that bachelor versus college football crossover line yet. Yeah, I mean, I was just in Baton Rouge this past Saturday, and it was crazy because part of me couldn't believe it. Part of me was like, oh my gosh, this is where we are. The first ever game in the history of the SEC between two interim head coaches, between LSU and Arkansas this past weekend. And obviously, it was a very interesting game, a rivalry game, obviously with the Golden Boot on the line in that trophy game, but just a bizarre place to be at this point in the season, especially knowing that both of those programs had been through some time at that point. It wasn't like their head coaches had just been fired the week before, right? Arkansas obviously has spent the majority of the season with Bobby Petrino having taken over, and Frank Wilson was in his second game for the LSU Tigers. But you mentioned all the other job openings right now as well, right? Auburn and Florida, and trying to figure out, is Ole Miss going to have a job opening? Are there going to be other schools around the SEC who are having to figure it out? So it is truly a wild place to be. I'm getting to the point where it's my eighth SEC football season. And the fact that I will have seen a university, or more than one university, I should say, go through a second or third head coach at this point. Like, it's not only making me feel a little bit old, but that cycle truly never stops. And especially as it gets more and more competitive every single year.
Absolutely. And you were the sideline reporter for that Arkansas LSU game. And when you cover a game like that with two teams who have been struggling as of lately, especially Arkansas, they're not going to be bowl eligible. And now both of their coaches are fired. How do you focus on the game when you're covering that as a reporter rather than just talking mostly about the fact that their coaches are gone?
Yeah, I think it's a balance of both, right? Because we always go into each game, talking about, obviously what the most important storylines are as far as on the field, and making sure we're doing right by the players and still telling their stories and talking about what they're working towards. But we also know that both of these fan bases are tuning in, and the majority of their conversations Sunday through Friday is, who's our next head coach going to be? And we're tracking planes. I mean, Sarah, I am walking into the stadium and I'm walking out of the stadium on Saturday in Baton Rouge. And I've got LSU fans coming up to me telling me that they're tracking planes and that there's a certain someone's plane who's in Baton Rouge tonight. And I said, isn't a certain someone coaching a game tonight in like a pretty important, well, he's going to be here after the game is over. Like, before the game had even started and the minute the game was even over. So, to put on a fair broadcast, we're talking about that as well. And obviously these schools are in two very different places. There had been some reporting coming out, I think on Thursday or Friday, that Coach O was a candidate for Arkansas.
Yeah.
I was told that that is absolutely not the case, and that was not a realistic report that was put out on the other side. For LSU, I said this on the broadcast, I understand that LSU is probably going to be looking for somebody who has a stacked resume and is a proven winner. But I injected my opinion a little bit on Saturday, and I said I really think that LSU has a candidate that they should talk to on their staff right now in defensive coordinator Blake Baker, after our conversations with him on Friday, and straight up asking him, do you want to be a head coach? Would you want to be a head coach here? How could you not, was his answer essentially. So it's a balancing act of both of those things. But also remembering, and anybody who's there or watching knows how important these games are to these players as well. It was Michael Van Buren's first start for LSU. So it's always easy to make sure you're going back and forth between the football and the off the field stuff. The football probably takes a little bit more precedent just because it's a 4-quarter game, but we always work in those coaching conversations as well.
And this past weekend, I was actually in Oxford for the Ole Miss Florida game. I went to Florida, and there were so many Florida fans there, but they weren't there to really watch the Gators. They were there to watch a man who could potentially be their head coach, and that man's name is Lane Kiffin. What are your thoughts on this Lane Kiffin, Ole Miss, Florida saga, and now possibly LSU?
Yeah, it's funny that you started our show with the most dramatic season yet, because I was trying to explain this to my dad. My dad actually went to Baton Rouge with me, and I was trying to explain, how we got here for both sides, Arkansas and LSU, why they fired their head coach, why there's so many coaching jobs opening right now. And he said, well, why does everybody want Lane Kiffin? And I said, well, that's a layered answer too. Like, you look at Lane Kiffin's resume, what he's been able to do at Ole Miss, obviously the personality that he brings in. But I said, literally imagine The Bachelor, and all of these schools are making their best pitch, and Lane Kiffin is the Bachelor, is how it feels right now. It is a very interesting, I don't know that I've ever seen anything like this. I don't know that there's ever been a situation like this with one name getting so much publicity. And I actually made this joke to an LSU fan on Saturday. If only we could clone the guy so everybody could have their own version of Lane Kiffin. Unfortunately, it's 2025, and hopefully we'll never be able to do that, but we can't do that at this point.
His dog. Tom Brady did with his dog.
That is true. I don't know how to feel about that, but I lean towards I'm not okay with that. I don't know how I would feel, honestly, if I were an Ole Miss fan and I know that this team is on the brink of making a run in the college football playoff. My coach hasn't made a decision. I totally get why fans are out there saying, okay, well, if you're going to go. But I also understand the fans who are saying, well, just let them finish the season. Whatever happens, deal with it after that. It's messy, to be honest. And working for the SEC network, candidly, we're not in the business of saying this current SEC coach is a great fit at this next SEC school. It's just not something that we try to do. But obviously the noise is out there that there is obviously a huge potential for this to happen. I wonder, though, and I don't have any inside information, this is just me having talked to Lane a bunch and kind of being around the SEC. I wonder if he even knows at this point. I really wonder, because I've tried to put myself in his shoes. If it were me, I would wake up one day thinking one thing and wake up the other day thinking the next. So I truly wonder if he even knows what he wants right now.
Yeah. And on top of that, Ole Miss looks like they're a lock to go to the college football playoff, but you've got Ole Miss, Georgia, Alabama, Oklahoma. Who am I missing?
Texas A&M.
Texas A&M, of course.
Yeah.
And it's like there's so many SEC teams that look like they are locks to go to the college football playoff. Well, Oklahoma just made their case last weekend, it seems.
Yeah.
But we still don't know who's playing in the SEC championship game. We probably won't find that out until rivalry week, which makes that week even more intense.
Yeah, there's so many different scenarios. I believe there was a clinching scenario last week, but of course, a lot of different dominoes had to fall. A lot of different things had to happen. It is interesting to sit back and look and think about, could Texas A&M win their first conference championship this year if they're able to go to Atlanta? I've talked to some Georgia fans who were like, we don't really want to go. We're good. We've been there before. We want to host a home playoff game in Athens. We don't really care about the bye week. That's fine. Leave us just in one of those second 4 seeds where we get to play that extra game in Athens. But if you're Texas A&M and you're Mike Elko, of course you want to go to Atlanta and be able to put an exclamation mark on the end of the season. And I would even say the same thing for Kalen DeBoer after how that first year went, obviously not reaching the SEC championship game a season ago. Instead, Texas and Georgia battle it out. If you're Kalen DeBoer, after having lost a late season game again to Oklahoma, yes, you're still very much looking good for the college football playoff, but why would you not want to say we won an SEC championship in our second year, right? So from a fan standpoint, I look at Texas A&M and Alabama as a matchup that I would love to see. Obviously, every matchup would be a great one, but that's kind of where my attention is right now, if wondering if we could get that.
Yeah, because last year it seemed like the teams that got the bye didn't really do that well
Yeah.
because they won their conference championship or whatever, they got the bye. And it's now like, okay, we get to host a home game on a playoff weekend. Like, you can't really pass that up.
Yeah, and I mean, there's a lot to be said for the time that passes between your last game and then if you're a top 4 seed who gets that bye, that the time that you're going not being on the football field. And yeah, these guys are beat up by the time we get to December, but the continuation of the end of the season and keeping the body moving and keeping the body in fighting shape, honestly, I think there's a lot to be said about that. That's almost more of a mental and emotional factor that we don't talk about enough from the end of the regular season and championship week to the beginning of the playoffs. So I'll be curious to see in the second year of 12 teams how those teams with buys versus no buys perform again this year.
Yeah, I like to see how that works too, because this new 12-team playoff, I mean, we're all kind of watching, like, what do we know about this, how this works exactly? I want to start, or I want to go back, way back to when you started college. You went to University of South Carolina.
Mhm.
Where'd you grow up originally?
So I grew up in a small town north of Charlotte called Huntersville. No one's ever heard of Huntersville before unless you're in the area. So I say I'm from Charlotte, but right up the road, honestly, only about 90 minutes north of South Carolina. So it was closer to home for me than like NC State or UNC or any of that stuff. So I stayed in the Carolinas.
Okay, so you went to USC, studied
Mhm.
journalism, I assume. And then how did you make your career path? I know you worked at the station in Jacksonville, because
Mhm.
when I was graduating or I was starting at the TV station in Gainesville, I remember you were there or you were just leaving. So talk about your local news route and how you ended up at the SEC network.
Yeah, so I was a local news or am a local news alumni. That was the path that I took in college. So, long story short, because it is a long story, everybody's grind story is
Oh,
quite long. Obviously, I started interning. One of the kind of many little jobs that I tried to pick up throughout college. I hosted on GamecockCentral.com, which is now part of the On3 network. I interned in a newspaper. I knocked on the door of what was formerly known as Speed TV here in Charlotte and asked for an internship when I was 16. Like, I did a bunch of really random things. And then I got to college, and after my freshman year, I went to a career fair, got an internship with the local CBS affiliate, WLTX, in Columbia. And I spent the summer doing that, a little bit of everything. Really, it was a news internship, even though I made my intentions really clear that I was interested in doing sports. But you know how it goes. It's a 2-man sports department. We need all the help we can get in news, not sports.
yeah.
So what ended up happening was at the end of the summer, time to go back to school, I connected with the sports director. And one of the things that is almost always needed, no matter where you are people to shoot high school football games. Yep. So I would take my own car because I wasn't a full-time employee of the news station. I couldn't take the news cars. I would drive my own car, which was a 1998 Nissan Maxima with 200,000 miles on it. Died in a drive-through one night after I was done shooting high school
Oh,
football. And I had to knock on the window of the drive-through and say, "Can you please help me push my car
oh my
into a spot?" That was after like driving all over South Carolina shooting high school football. So did that every single Friday night. That at some point sort of snowballed into working weekends part-time. I would work the assignment desk. I would answer the phones. I would scroll the teleprompters. When an anchor didn't have their scripts, I would run the scripts out to the studio. Literally just pocket knife, whatever, Swiss Army knife, tool player that you needed from me. I was doing that. So I did that for about 2 years. And as those 2 years went by, I kind of picked up more and more responsibility. That turned into a weekend photographer. So I was the cameraman. I would go out and I would shoot food festivals, car crashes, house fires, any interviews that they would need for the weekend newscast. I would do that. And then that turned into, well, how about instead of the Friday night sports anchor taping a sports cast for the Saturday morning show, what if I just did one live for you so that it's a little bit more organic and we can go, back and forth more and there's more of a presence? Somehow they said yes to doing that. So I would do that on Saturday mornings, then go back to answering the phones for the rest of the night. All that said, I started to get more reps in front of the camera and being on air and telling stories and doing interviews. So right before my senior year at South Carolina, I was a part-time employee at that point, getting paid, not driving my own car anymore, which was great. It was dead, long gone. I went to my boss because I learned that the weekend sports anchor was going to be leaving and taking another job. And I went to her in the middle of what was snowstorm coverage. And we were all living at the studio for like 3 days straight. And I said, hey, I know this isn't top of mind right now because we're in the middle of covering a snowstorm, but when this guy leaves, know you're going to be looking for a replacement. I'm here. I will schedule my classes to be done by 3 o'clock every day. I'm already here on the weekends. I can work nights, whatever you need from me. I will be your weekend sports anchor. And by some stroke of luck, she said yes. And I could not have had a better situation with the sports director, who could have grumbled and been so mad that this college kid was taking this job. And so I did that for the next 2 years, and I went to school full time and finished school, and I'd work nights and I'd work weekends and I'd be doing homework before the 11 o'clock news. And I'd go out and anchor the 11 o'clock news, and then I'd go home and get up and be at an 8 a.m. class the next day. And then that turned into Jacksonville. Spent just under 3 years in Jacksonville before ESPN called, and here I am now. So that's my 5-minute spiel, Spark Notes version of the story.
Yeah. And so when you were in Jacksonville, you covered the Jags, the Gators,
Yeah.
FSU. Also, probably some hurricane coverage included in that too, in case.
Yes. And a lot of people don't realize this. Like when you're in a Florida news station or when there's any kind of weather, if you're a sports reporter, you become a news reporter because the sports are canceled when there's a hurricane. There's no high school football. There's no high school basketball. So my shift for both, I think, hurricanes that I was there for was the 2 a.m. to 2 p.m. shift. And I slept on a cot in the sports office. And it was the most like surreal, scary. I remember once I was out, it was like 4 a.m. I'm in the news truck with the other sports guy because they pair the two of us together. They said, hey, they call us. We just got a call that there's a neighborhood being evacuated right now because they live kind of on a creek and the creek is rising really fast. We need you guys to get over there. I said, they're evacuating the neighborhood and you need us to get over there? What do you mean? That doesn't make sense. Yeah. We need you guys to get over there. I said, like, get over there and help them? Because sure, but like, no, we need you to get over there and shoot video. I said, I am a sports reporter. You want me to go to the danger. You want me to go to the rising water, like in the hurricane. And so that was one of those moments where I was like, maybe I'm not cut out to do hard news in that way because I'm not, I'll go help people, but I don't know. I'm not going to stand in the rising water. And then I did end up interviewing somebody about knee deep standing in the middle of downtown Jacksonville, which was flooded. And this guy was trying to get into his car, or what I thought was his car. We were on live TV and it turned out we're pretty sure he was breaking into the car and he was trying to steal what was in the car. And then he was like, yeah, there's a gun in here. I got to get it out. Like on live TV. And, yeah, I think I literally was like, okay, thanks so much. And then just turned around and started walking away. People have been cooped up in their house for days. They're calling the station. They're like, put more of the sports people on. Like, this is hilarious. They don't know what they're doing.
I did local news in Arkansas, and it was very much tornado coverage and ice, snow. And as a Florida girl, I'm like, whoa, what is this? So I was gonna ask, what are your crazy stories? But you hit those on the head.
It was scary, but like our hope as the sports people doing that, we were at gas stations interviewing people. And honestly, like there were a lot of people who were had really good spirits about them. And we were kind of like, you know what, if we can provide a little bit of a lighter, if we can find people who are looking for the bright side in this and maybe make people laugh, maybe that's our role in this. And we can let the more well-trained news professionals cover,
News.
the more serious stuff. But yeah, that was it was completely unintentional. Like, I wasn't trying to be funny, but it turned into this big, yeah, yeah. That was not one of my brightest moments.
Yeah. And then now, so after you finished your contract, I assume at your station in Jacksonville, how did you make that transition to ESPN and SEC Network? How did that go about?
Yeah, so I had met someone in college when I was at South Carolina, and I've shared this story before, and I'm just as embarrassed every single time I share it. I had like this little party trick in college where I had this rap about South Carolina. And one day I decided I was going to record it and put it on YouTube. No, you can't find it. I actually can't even find it because I've lost access to the YouTube page that I hid the video on. I need to work on that in the off season. But this guy had found this video. His name's Barron, and he works at ESPNU at the time. And he reached out and he asked if he could use the video on College Football Daily, which was one of the shows he was producing at the time. Fast forward 8 years later, I had kept up with him throughout the years, sent him my work every 6 months. Hey, this is what I've been doing, going through local news. And he called me out of the blue. I was actually in the process of trying to get out of TV. It wasn't really going the way that I thought it was going to go. I couldn't feed myself on a local news salary. I couldn't pay my bills.
I get it.
And I wasn't having luck getting to any other station. I had been turned away from some bigger markets in local news. And then he called and said, we might be looking for someone. Would you be interested if I helped sort of get your name in the door? And I said, absolutely. Like, if this works out, this is kind of my God moment, that I'm not done and that there's still something left for me in TV. And lo and behold, I went and interviewed and auditioned, and a couple months later ended up getting the job, moved to Charlotte. And I hope the rest is history, because it truly is amazing that I was on round 3 of an entry-level sales job. And now here we are. So I'm very thankful.
Yeah. And I think that just shows that this industry is very competitive, but also
Yeah.
you really have to be yourself and also be so persistent. Don't be afraid of being turned down, because you never know what could happen. And also those relationships, and just keep them all with everyone for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, being yourself really is, it sounds so cliche, but it really is the most important thing. No journey is going to look the same. There's no blueprint for getting where you want to go, no matter what the business is, no matter what the job is. So if you try to follow someone else's blueprint, well, you're not them. It's not going to work for you like it did for them. The only thing that will work for you is your journey, and being true to yourself helps you figure out that journey truly faster. And I believe that, because I feel like a walking testament to that for sure.
I love that so much. And one more question before we get you out of here. Do you have any sideline games this weekend or this week?
Yes. Yeah. I will be at the Charlotte, Georgia game this week. And then I believe I have the Clemson at South Carolina game for rivalry weekend. So it will be a very interesting Thanksgiving weekend, as you mentioned, for the SEC. But like, in that game, 2 programs whose seasons haven't gone the way that they thought they were going to. You can make a lot of things better if you win your rivalry game. So that'll be sort of the type of game that we have.
Well, that should be so fun. And guys, make sure you check out Alyssa on ESPN and SiriusXM and SEC Network. But before we leave, FanDuel's getting you ready for the NFL season with an offer you don't want to miss. New customers can just bet $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win. That's right. Pick a bet $5, and if it wins, you'll unlock $300 in bonus bets to use all across the app. And you can build parlays, player props, and ride the live lines. FanDuel has you covered. The only question is, are you ready to play? So make sure you visit FanDuel.com/SECU to download the FanDuel app today. Alyssa, thank you so much for joining me, and we'll see you next time, guys.
Thank you for having me.